I gave up 4 years of my life for Sterling Consulting. No weekends, no holidays, no relationships. James Whitmore, the boss, promised I'd become the youngest partner in the firm's history. But when the promotion came, he gave it to his nephew from London, someone he literally had to beg to take the job. I handed in my resignation with a calm smile. James chuckled until he read the letter. Then his face dropped. "You're not serious," he said. But I was. And what happened next? No one saw it coming. Let me take you back to that day. There I was, standing in Sterling Consulting's fancy conference room, champagne glass in my hand, thinking this was finally my moment. 4 years of my hard work had all led to this. James Whitmore, our CEO, tapped his glass. "Ladies and gentlemen, I'm thrilled to announce our newest partner." My heart was racing. This was it. All those times he'd said, "Just wait until the annual meeting, Evelyn, and you're definitely partner material," were about to pay off. Then he said the words that shattered my world. "Please congratulate Marcus Whitmore, Harvard MBA, who's agreed to leave his practice in London to bring fresh ideas to Sterling Consulting." Marcus Whitmore. His nephew. Not me. I felt like someone had punched me in the stomach. The room was clapping, but I couldn't move. Fresh ideas? I'd helped grow this company from 150 employees to over 300. I'd closed deals that everyone said were impossible. I'd given up my entire life for this company. And he gave my job to someone who didn't even want it. I somehow managed to smile and clap along with everyone else, but inside I was dying. The champagne in my mouth tasted bitter. James looked at me across the room and actually winked, like this was all some funny joke. Then he made it worse. "Evelyn's been such a valuable team member. I know she'll help Marcus get settled in his new role. Help him get settled. Train my own replacement." The humiliation was crushing. But what I heard him say on the phone later that night, that's when everything changed. Before I tell you about that devastating phone call, you need to understand who I was at Sterling Consulting. I wasn't just another employee, I was their go-to person when everything else failed. And I knew it. When I started 4 years ago, Sterling had 150 employees and was struggling to compete with the big consulting firms. By the time of that awful announcement, we had over 300 people and were landing contracts that made our competitors jealous. And honestly, I knew I was a huge part of making that happen. My department, which I was effectively heading, was pulling in 30% of the entire company's revenue. That's more than twice what any other department was bringing in. I lived and breathed that company. While my best friend Sophia was out dating and having a social life, I was pulling all-nighters in the office. "You're going to burn out," she'd tell me as I grabbed another energy drink from our fridge. But I had a plan. James Whitmore had promised me something that kept me going through every missed dinner, every canceled weekend, every relationship that ended because I was married to my job. "Your partner material, Evelyn," he'd say during our quarterly reviews. "Just wait for the AGM. Your time is coming." But here's what made it worse. I had to deal with Derek Chin every single day. Derek was one of those colleagues who smiled to your face while stabbing you in the back. He'd been at Sterling for 6 years, and he had this annoying habit of taking credit for team wins while somehow never being around when things went wrong. During client presentations, Derek would position himself right next to James, nodding along like he'd personally crafted every strategy. Then he'd make these subtle comments like, "Evelyn's been really lucky with her client assignments," or "Some people just have a natural charm that opens doors." Lucky. As if closing a $50 million deal with Morrison Industries was about luck and not the 3 months I spent understanding their supply chain issues better than they did. The clients loved me, though. I had testimonials from CEOs calling me brilliant and irreplaceable. I'd closed deals that other consultants called impossible. My reputation in the industry was solid gold. So when James kept saying, "Just wait for the AGM," I believed him. I trusted him. I thought all those sacrifices were building towards something incredible. The morning of the annual general meeting, I woke up feeling like a kid on Christmas morning. This was it. 4 years of grinding, for years of proving myself, for years of being told, "Your time is coming." It was all about to pay off. I got to the office early and headed straight to the conference room. The setup was perfect. Elegant table arrangements, Sterling's best china, champagne flutes ready for the celebration. Everything screamed, this is a big day. Derek showed up about an hour before the meeting, and I could tell something was off. He had this smug look on his face, like he knew something I didn't. When he saw me arranging my notes, he walked over with that fake smile of his. Big day today, huh, he said, adjusting his tie. May the best person win. There was something in his tone that made my stomach turn. The way he said best person felt loaded, like he was implying I wasn't it. But I brushed it off. Derek was always playing mind games. When James finally called the meeting to order, my heart was pounding so hard I was sure everyone could hear it. This was my moment. 4 years of waiting, and it was finally here. Today marks a new chapter for Sterling Consulting, James began, his voice carrying that authoritative tone that commanded respect. We're bringing in new leadership, fresh perspectives, and innovative thinking that will take us to the next level. Fresh perspectives. I liked the sound of that. I'd been pushing for modernizing our client approach for months. Please join me in welcoming our newest partner, Marcus Whitmore.
Wait, what?
Marcus brings an impressive Harvard MBA and has built a successful practice in London. We're thrilled he's agreed to join our team and lead our expansion into international markets. The room erupted in applause, but I felt like I was underwater. Everything sounded muffled and distant. Marcus Whitmore stood up, tall, polished, confident, and I realized I was looking at the person who'd just stolen my life. Derek was the first to clap, loud and enthusiastic, positioning himself where James could see his supportive reaction. Of course he was. I somehow managed to join the applause, my hands moving mechanically while my brain tried to process what had just happened. Colleagues around the table were shooting me sympathetic looks, some mouthing, "I'm sorry," when James wasn't looking. I'd like Evelyn to personally show Marcus the ropes and help him settle into his new role, James continued, and I wanted to crawl under the table. Her experience with our clients will be invaluable during this transition. Invaluable for training my replacement. The irony was suffocating. After the meeting, people approached me with whispered apologies and awkward pats on the shoulder. But Derek? Derek looked positively pleased with himself, like my disappointment was exactly what he'd been hoping for. That evening, I stayed late, not to catch up on work, but because I was still finding it hard to process what had just happened. The office was mostly empty, just the hum of computers and the distant sound of a cleaning crew. I was grabbing some files from my office when I heard James's voice coming from his corner office. He was on the phone and his door was slightly open. I should have walked away. I should have minded my own business. But something about his tone made me freeze. Had to practically beg Marcus to leave London, he was saying, laughing. Kid didn't even want the job at first. Said he was happy with his real estate investments. My stomach dropped. He had to beg Marcus to take the position that I'd been working toward for 4 years? But you know how it is with these Fortune 500 clients, James continued. They need to see someone who commands respect. Someone with executive presence. I moved closer to the door, my heart pounding. Evelyn's solid, don't get me wrong. She's reliable, hardworking. But she's predictable. These big clients need a man who looks the part, you know? Someone who walks into a boardroom and immediately establishes authority. The world tilted. Everything I'd worked for, everything I'd sacrificed, came down to the fact that I wasn't a man. She'll adapt, James continued, his voice casual, like he was discussing the weather. She always does. That's what makes her valuable. She's dependable. She'll train Marcus, help him understand the client relationships, and everything will work out fine. Dependable. Predictable. Not leadership material because I was a woman. I stumbled back to my office, my hands shaking. For years of my life, and it had never mattered how good I was. It had never mattered how many deals I closed or how many clients specifically requested me. In James's mind, I was just the reliable worker bee who'd train the real leaders.
I should have quit right then.
Instead, I made a decision that changed both our lives forever. I wasn't surprised when James called me into his office the next morning. His voice on the intercom had a forced, upbeat quality that I knew all too well. This time, I knew it was about Marcus. When I walked into his office, he was leaning back in his expensive leather chair, the city's skyline a perfect backdrop. He gestured to the chair in front of his desk, and I sat down, my hands folded calmly in my lap. The rage from the night before hadn't faded, but it had hardened into something cold and deliberate. "Evelyn," he began, "I know you're disappointed about the partnership. I get it. You've worked incredibly hard." I looked him straight in the eye, keeping my voice level. "James, for 4 years, I've put everything into this company. You promised me that given my achievements, I would be the youngest partner in Sterling's history. My entire life has been geared toward that goal." He shifted in his chair, his easy smile faltering.
Now hold on.
"That's not fair. I've always been your biggest supporter, and I still am. That's why I need you to understand this decision." He leaned forward, his tone turning serious. "The truth is, Evelyn, we need a partner with international experience. Marcus has built a successful practice in London. His connections and his knowledge of the European market are exactly what we need to expand Sterling globally. It was a strategic move, not a personal one. You are, and always will be, a fundamental part of this firm's success." The lie rolled off his tongue, so easily. If I hadn't overheard him on the phone, I would have swallowed every word. I would have believed this was about a strategic move, not a man who looked the part. The audacity of it all was breathtaking. He paused, letting his words sink in. "Look, I know this is a tough transition, but you are the absolute backbone of Sterling. This is me preparing you for the next partnership. And I can promise you, you're at the top of my list." He then slid a file across the desk. "And to show you how much I value you, I'm putting you in charge of the Technova Industries project. Our biggest potential client this quarter, a $75 million deal. You'll have complete ownership of this. And to ensure its success, I'm putting Marcus on the team to learn from you. A training ground for his nephew, disguised as a promotion for me." The irony was suffocating. I picked up the file and stood up, a slight smile on my face that hid the storm brewing inside me. "I'll handle it, James," I said, my voice steady. "I always do."
He smiled, relieved.
He thought he had just dodged a bullet and smoothed things over. But another storm was brewing within me, and I had to figure out my next move. Walking to that first project meeting, I was furious. My professional duty was warring with my personal resentment, and honestly, the resentment was winning. How was I supposed to work with the man who'd stolen my future? But then Marcus walked into the conference room, and something unexpected happened. He didn't swagger in like he owned the place. He didn't interrupt me or try to take control. Instead, he pulled out a notebook and said, "I'd love to hear your thoughts on Technova's pain points. James mentioned you've been tracking their industry challenges for months."
Wait.
He'd actually done homework? As I started explaining Technova's supply chain issues and their expansion concerns, Marcus asked intelligent questions. Not the surface-level stuff that Derek would throw out to sound important, but real questions that showed he was actually listening and processing what I was saying. "That's brilliant," he said when I explained my strategy for addressing their cost concerns. I never would have thought to approach it that way. It caught me off guard. When was the last time someone at Sterling had called my work brilliant without adding a but afterward? We ended up working late that first night, ordering Chinese takeout and spreading documents across the conference table. Marcus treated every idea I shared like it was valuable, taking notes and asking follow-up questions. The contrast with James's dismissive attitude was jarring. "You really know this industry inside and out," Marcus said around midnight as we finally started packing up. "Technova's lucky to have you on their account." Despite myself, I felt that familiar warmth you get when someone actually recognizes your expertise. And that scared me. I was supposed to hate this man, not start respecting him. 3 weeks into the Technova project, we were pulling another late night when Marcus did something that completely threw me off balance. We just finished a particularly intense strategy session, and I was exhausted, running on pizza and caffeine. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said, closing his laptop. "And please be honest with me." I braced myself for some awkward question about office politics or James's expectations. Instead, he said, "Did I take something that was supposed to be yours?" The directness of it caught me completely off guard. I stared at him, trying to figure out if this was some kind of trap. "Because if I did," he continued, "I need to know. The way people look at you when James talks about the partnership, the way you go quiet during certain meetings. I'm not stupid, Evelyn. I could have lied. I could have played it off as office gossip. Instead, I found myself telling him everything. About James's promises, about the 4 years of working toward partnership, about the sacrifices I'd made. Marcus listened without interrupting, his face growing more troubled with every detail. For what it's worth, he said finally, I almost didn't take the position. I've got real estate investments that bring in more than this job pays. I could retire tomorrow if I wanted to. The casual way he said it, like walking away from financial security was no big deal, reminded me how different our worlds were. But then, he surprised me again. I took this job because I wanted a new challenge, not because I needed it. But you earned this. And I'm sitting in a chair that should have been yours. It was the first time anyone at Sterling had acknowledged what had actually happened. Not James with his corporate speak about fresh perspectives, not Derek with his subtle digs about my luck. Just honest recognition of the truth. I'm sorry, Marcus said, and he meant it. For the first time since that awful announcement, I felt a crack in the armor of anger I'd built around myself. The Technova presentation was scheduled for the following Friday, and by Thursday night, Marcus and I had created something incredible. Our proposal addressed every one of their pain points with concrete solutions, backed by data I'd been collecting for months and enhanced by Marcus's fresh perspective on international expansion. This is partnership-level work, Marcus said as we reviewed the final slides. You should be presenting this as a partner, not as someone training her replacement. The presentation went better than I could have imagined. Technova's CEO, Rebecca Carter, was impressed from the first slide. But the moment that really mattered came when she said, the supply chain optimization strategy is particularly innovative. Whose approach is this? Before I could even open my mouth, Marcus jumped in. That's all Evelyn. She identified the inefficiencies and developed the entire framework. I just helped with the international components. Rebecca turned to me with genuine respect. Brilliant work. This is exactly the kind of thinking we need. After the meeting, as we walked back to the office, I felt something I hadn't experienced in weeks, genuine pride in my work that wasn't tainted by resentment or politics. You didn't have to give me credit for everything, I told Marcus. I didn't give you credit, he replied. I just told the truth. That was your strategy, your research, your innovation. I wasn't going to let anyone think otherwise. Back at the office, colleagues were buzzing about the Technova success. For the first time in weeks, people were talking about my work without that pitying tone they'd used since the partnership announcement. Sarah from marketing stopped by my desk. I heard Technova was blown away by your presentation. Nice work. Even Tom from accounting, who barely ever talked to anyone, nodded approvingly when he passed my office. Watching Marcus interact with the team over the next few days, I started to see something I hadn't expected. He wasn't trying to overshadow anyone. He wasn't playing political games. He was just competent and decent. Maybe he wasn't the villain in my story after all. But if Marcus wasn't the villain, Derek Chin was certainly auditioning for the role. Over the past month, Derek had been making increasingly snide comments about my mentoring duties. He'd walk by my office during my sessions with Marcus and make remarks like, "Still training your replacement, I see," always with that sarcastic smile. What I didn't realize was that Derek had been paying very close attention to those training sessions. I'd been developing a comprehensive client retention and go-to-market strategy for months, a framework that could revolutionize how Sterling approached new business. It included specific methodologies for client psychology mapping, competitive analysis matrices, and relationship-building protocols that I'd refined through years of trial and error. During my sessions with Marcus, I'd been sharing parts of this strategy, explaining how I'd built long-term relationships with clients like Morrison Industries and Phoenix Corporation. Derek would sometimes linger nearby, supposedly working on his own projects, but I caught him taking notes more than once. I should have been more careful. The quarterly board meeting was on a Wednesday, and I wasn't invited. Despite the Technova success, I was still just a senior consultant, not a partner. But Marcus filled me in on what happened afterward, and his face was pale with anger. Derek presented your entire framework to the board, he said, pacing around my office. Your client psychology mapping, your competitive analysis methods, even your specific examples from the Morrison account. He called it his innovative approach to strategic client engagement. My blood ran cold. He what? James ate it up. Called it exactly the kind of forward-thinking we need and praised Derek for his initiative. I tried to tell James that it sounded so much like what you worked on. He waved it off. I felt sick. Those methodologies represented years of my work, my insights, my carefully developed understanding of client relationships. And Derek had stolen all of it. I marched straight to James's office, not even bothering to knock. We need to talk, I said, closing the door behind me. Evelyn, if this is about Derek's presentation, I think you're overreacting, James said before I could even start. Good strategies spread throughout organizations. That's how we grow. Those weren't Derek's strategies. They were mine. Every framework, every methodology, every case study he presented, I developed all of it. James leaned back in his chair with that patronizing expression I'd grown to hate. Now, Evelyn, Derek's been here longer than you. He's got institutional knowledge that he stole my work, James.
And you know it.
Look, James said, his tone turning dismissive, Derek needs this recognition. He's been passed over for promotions before, and frankly, he's got more time to focus on innovation than you do. What's that supposed to mean? James shrugged. You're going to get married eventually, probably start a family. Derek's committed to his career long-term. It makes sense to invest in people who'll be here for the duration. The words hit me like a physical blow. I stared at James, wondering if I'd actually heard him correctly. Did you just say that my work doesn't matter because I might get married someday? That's not what I said, James replied, but his tone suggested he thought I was being overly dramatic. I'm talking about long-term career commitment. Derek's dedicated his life to this company. I've given 4 years of my life to this company. I've worked 80-hour weeks, missed every family event, turned down relationships because I was focused on building my career here. And you're dismissing all of that because of some hypothetical future marriage? James waved his hand dismissively. You're taking this too personally, Evelyn. Business decisions have to be made based on practical considerations. I felt something snap inside me. All the anger I'd been holding back since that awful partnership announcement came flooding out, but not as an explosion, as cold, clear fury. Practical considerations, I repeated. Like how Derek stole my proprietary strategies and you rewarded him for it. Derek adapted existing methodologies. Derek copied my work word for word, and you know it. From the corner of my eye, I saw Marcus standing in the doorway. He must have heard the raised voices. His face was dark with anger as he listened to his uncle's casual dismissal of my work. This conversation is over, James said, standing up. I expect you to be professional about this situation. I walked out of that office with my head held high, but inside I was done. Completely, utterly done. Marcus followed me to my office, closing the door behind him. I heard everything, he said quietly. That was unacceptable. Welcome to the new Sterling Consulting, I replied, my voice hollow. Where your work only matters if you're the right gender with the right family connections. Marcus was quiet for a long moment. Then he said, I'm starting to understand why you've been so angry. This place has become increasingly toxic ever since I arrived. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop open, staring at a blank document. Sophia was out with friends, living the social life I'd sacrificed for my career. The apartment was quiet except for the sound of my own breathing. I started typing. Dear James, please accept this letter as my formal resignation. That night, I wrote the letter that would change everything. I spent the night crafting my resignation letter. Not the angry, emotional rant that I wanted to write, but something professional and devastating in its simplicity. Every word was chosen carefully, every sentence designed to cut through James's corporate armor and hit him where it hurt most. Monday morning, I printed it on our best letterhead, signed it with my favorite pen, and walked straight to James's corner office. His secretary wasn't in yet, so I knocked on his door and walked in without waiting for permission. We need to talk, I said, placing the letter on his mahogany desk. James looked up from his computer, clearly annoyed at the interruption. Evelyn, I don't have time for more drama about Derek's presentation. That matter is closed. Read the letter. He glanced at the envelope like it might bite him, then tore it open with his usual dramatic flair. I watched his face change as he read, his expression shifting from mild irritation to confusion to something approaching panic. "You can't be serious," he said, looking up at me with wide eyes. "Completely serious." James shot to his feet, the letter crumpling in his grip. "This is ridiculous, Evelyn. You're having a tantrum because things didn't go your way." "A tantrum?" I kept my voice level, professional. "James, this is a business decision based on 4 years of data." He started pacing behind his desk, that familiar silver hair catching the morning light. "You think you're irreplaceable? Is that what this is about? You think Sterling Consulting can't function without Evelyn Hayes?" The mocking tone in his voice was exactly what I'd expected. Classic James, trying to make me feel small and foolish for having standards. "This is just a tantrum," he continued, his voice getting louder. "You're upset that we promoted Marcus instead of you, so now you're trying to hurt the company. Well, let me tell you something." He turned to face me directly, his face flushed with anger and arrogance. "You're just one cog in a well-oiled machine, Evelyn. A replaceable part. Derek and Marcus will handle your clients, and in 6 months, no one will even remember you were here." The words hung in the air between us, and I felt that familiar cold clarity settle over me. This was the moment I'd been preparing for without even knowing it. I smiled, the kind of calm smile that comes when you know exactly what to say. "You're absolutely right, James. Even the best machine fails when you replace quality components with cheap knockoffs." His face went white. "But here's what you didn't consider," I continued, my voice steady and conversational. "I wasn't just a cog in your machine. I was the engineer who built a big part of it. And when I walk out that door, I'm taking the blueprints with me." James started to say something, but I wasn't finished. "Derek stole my strategies, not my relationships. He can present my frameworks to boards all day long, but he can't replicate 4 years of trust with clients who specifically ask for me by name." The panic was starting to creep into his eyes now. I could see him doing the mental math, calculating which clients might follow me if I left. "Morrison Industries calls me directly when they have concerns," I said. "Technova's CEO has my personal number. Phoenix Corp invited me to their annual retreat next month." "Evelyn, let's be rational about this," James said, his tone shifting to something approaching desperation. "We can work something out. Maybe a salary increase, a better title." 4 years too late for that conversation. I picked up my purse and walked toward the door, then paused with my hand on the handle. "Oh, and James? The machine doesn't run itself. Someone has to understand how all the pieces fit together. Good luck figuring that out with Derek." I walked out of that office with my head high, leaving James standing behind his desk looking like a man who'd just realized he'd bet everything on the wrong horse. 20 minutes after I'd left James's office, Marcus appeared at my desk. His face was pale, and there was something in his expression that told me he'd already heard about my resignation. "Is it true?" he asked quietly. I nodded, continuing to pack my personal items into a cardboard box. "I'll finish out the week, but after that I'm done." Marcus sat down across from my desk, running his hands through his hair. "I just came from James's office. He told me about Derek stealing your work." "Finally admitting it?" "Only because he's panicking about you leaving. He actually asked me to convince you to stay." Marcus shook his head in disbelief. He said Derek borrowed your strategies and that it was no big deal because good ideas should be shared. I almost laughed at the hypocrisy. Of course he did. "Evelyn, I had no idea things would get this bad after I got here. It's disgusting." I looked up from my box, surprised by the genuine anger in his voice. "James told me I needed to manage you, like you were some difficult employee instead of the person keeping half his clients happy." Marcus's jaw was tight with frustration. "I've been in consulting for 8 years, and I've never seen anything like this." "Welcome to the new Sterling Consulting," I said dryly. Marcus was quiet for a moment, then said something that caught me completely off guard. "I can't be part of this anymore." "What do you mean?" "I mean I won't sit in a chair that was stolen from someone who earned it. I won't benefit from a system that destroys talent to feed egos." He stood up, his decision apparently made. I'm resigning too.
I stared at him.
Marcus, you don't have to do that. This isn't your fight. Yes, it is. The moment I accepted that partnership knowing you deserved it, it became my fight. He straightened his tie with grim determination. Besides, I told you I don't need this job. But you need justice, and sometimes the only way to get it is to make it cost them something. Watching Marcus walk toward James's office, I felt something I hadn't expected. Respect. Real, genuine respect for someone who was willing to sacrifice his own position to stand up for what was right. 2 resignations in one day. James was about to learn what it felt like when his well-oiled machine lost its 2 most important components at the same time. By lunch, the entire office was buzzing with gossip. 2 resignations in one morning, including the new partner who'd been there less than 2 months. People were gathering in small clusters, whispering and speculating about what had happened. Sarah from marketing was the first to approach me directly. Is it true you and Marcus both quit? It's true. Why? She asked, though her tone suggested she already suspected the answer. I shrugged. Sometimes you realize you're in the wrong place. Tom from accounting stopped by next, followed by 3 people from the design team. Everyone wanted to know what was going on, but I kept my answers brief and professional. Let James explain to everyone why he'd lost 2 senior staff members in one morning. The most interesting reaction came from Derek himself. Around 2 p.m., he sauntered over to my desk with that familiar smug smile. Heard you're leaving us, he said, leaning against my cubicle wall. Shame you couldn't handle a little healthy competition. I looked up from the files I was organizing. Is that what you call stealing someone's work? Healthy competition? Derek's smile faltered slightly. I have no idea what you mean. Of course you don't. Before Derek could respond, James appeared in the hallway, looking frazzled and desperate. He'd been calling emergency meetings all morning, trying to figure out how to handle the sudden departure of his nephew and his most productive senior consultant. Derek, my office. Now. As Derek hurried away, I caught fragments of conversations from nearby desks. People were scared. 2 major resignations suggested serious problems, and everyone was wondering if they should start updating their resumes. But James was putting on a good show. By 4 p.m., there was an email in everyone's inbox about exciting opportunities for advancement and streamlining our senior leadership structure. Corporate speak for, we're promoting whoever's left to fill the gaps. Derek got my title by 5 p.m. Senior Consultant, Client Relations. The same role I'd built from nothing over 4 years, handed to him like a participation trophy. Ava from HR stopped by my desk as I was finishing up. I'm sorry to see you go, Evelyn. Your clients are going to miss you. That was the first mention anyone had made of the clients, and it hit me that James was so focused on internal politics, he hadn't even considered how Morrison Industries or Technova might react to losing their primary contact. Have you told them yet? I asked. Ava's face went pale. James said he'd handle client communications personally. James handling client communications. The man who hadn't spoken directly to a client in 2 years was going to explain why their trusted consultant was suddenly gone. As I packed the last of my things, I felt a strange mix of sadness and anticipation. I was leaving behind 4 years of my life, but I was also walking toward something unknown and potentially incredible. My phone buzzed with a text from Sophia. Heard through the grapevine you quit. Emergency wine night tonight. For the first time in 4 years, I had no reason to say no. Tomorrow, James would start learning what his replaceable cog had actually been holding together. But tonight, I was going to celebrate the first day of my new life. That emergency wine night with Sophia turned into the conversation that changed my life. We were on her couch with a bottle of Pinot Grigio between us, and I was venting about James, Derek, and the whole Sterling disaster when she suddenly sat up straight. Wait, I just remembered something. My boyfriend Jake is a headhunter for executive positions. He mentioned a company looking for someone with your exact background. Jake was one of those connected guys who seemed to know everyone in the business world. I'd met him a few times at Sophia's parties, but we'd never talked shop. He works with tech companies and consulting firms, Sophia continued, already pulling out her phone. Let me text him. Within an hour, Jake had forwarded my information to Meridian Global, a consulting firm I'd heard about but never really considered. They were known for working with Fortune 100 companies, the kind of high-level clients that Sterling could only dream of landing. 2 days later, I was sitting across from CEO David Richardson and HR Director Patricia Moss in Meridian's downtown headquarters. The building itself was intimidating, 40 floors of glass and steel that screamed success. "Tell us why you left Sterling Consulting," David said, cutting straight to the point. He was younger than James, maybe late 40s, with the kind of focused energy that made you pay attention. I could have given them the diplomatic answer, talked about seeking new challenges and growth opportunities. Instead, I decided on honesty. I spent 4 years building client relationships and developing strategies that helped grow the company from 150 to 300 employees. When the partnership I'd been promised went to the CEO's nephew instead, I realized I was working for people who valued family connections over actual results. Patricia leaned forward. "How did that make you feel?" "Honestly, furious, but also clear about what I needed in my next role, a place that judges people on merit, not politics." David nodded approvingly. "Here's what you need to know about Meridian. We don't have ceilings here, Evelyn. We only have floors that you build for yourself. If you can deliver results, we'll give you every opportunity to succeed." The contrast with James's patronizing attitude was striking. David was talking to me like an equal, like someone whose expertise had value. "We've got a situation that could use your particular skill set," Patricia added. "Phoenix Industries is threatening to leave. It's a $75 million account, and frankly, we're not sure how to save it." My pulse quickened. This wasn't just a job interview anymore. It was an audition for something significant. "What makes you think I can help where others haven't?" David smiled. "Because according to your references, you have a gift for understanding what clients actually need versus what they say they need. Phoenix has been saying they want lower costs, but we think there's something deeper going on." For the first time in months, I felt that familiar excitement of a challenging puzzle to solve. Walking into Meridian Global on my first day felt like stepping into a different universe. Where Sterling had cramped cubicles and outdated computers, Meridian had open collaborative spaces, state-of-the-art technology, and actual windows that opened. Patricia met me at reception with a genuine smile. "Ready to see your new office?" My new office. Not a cubicle, not a shared workspace, but an actual corner office with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the city. My name was already on the door. Evelyn Hayes, Senior Director, Client Strategy. "The salary we discussed is just the base," Patricia explained as we reviewed my contract. "You'll also get equity stakes in major wins and profit-sharing bonuses. We believe in rewarding the people who drive our success." The salary was 40% higher than what I'd been making at Sterling. With bonuses and equity, I could potentially double my income in the first year. But the real test came that same afternoon when David introduced me to the Phoenix Industries situation. Phoenix was a tech giant worth billions, and they'd been Meridian's client for 3 years. Recently, though, they'd grown increasingly frustrated with service quality and were threatening to take their business to a competitor. I spent my first week diving deep into Phoenix's history with Meridian. What I found wasn't surprising. The account team had been treating symptoms instead of diagnosing the real problem. Phoenix wasn't actually concerned about cost. Their complaints about pricing only started after 3 major project delays in 6 months. They felt like Meridian wasn't taking their time seriously, so they were using cost as leverage to get attention. Classic client psychology. When people feel undervalued, they attack whatever they think will get a response. I proposed something radical. A 3-day intensive workshop where Phoenix's leadership team could work directly with our strategic team to rebuild the relationship from the ground up. Not a sales pitch, not a discount negotiation, but a genuine partnership reset. "That's expensive," David said when I presented the idea. "Flying their whole team here, putting them up in hotels, catering, we're looking at $50,000 just for the workshop." "It's a $75 million account," I replied. "If we lose them, that workshop cost becomes irrelevant." David approved it. The workshop was unlike anything I'd ever orchestrated. Instead of Meridian presenting to Phoenix, we made it collaborative. Their CEO, Michael Torres, worked alongside our strategy team to identify bottlenecks and communication gaps. Their operations director, Sarah Kim, helped us redesign project timelines to better align with their internal processes. By day 3, something magical was happening. Phoenix's team wasn't just engaged, they were excited. They weren't clients being sold to, they were partners building something together. This is exactly what we needed, Michael Torres said during our final session. For the first time in months, I feel like you actually understand our business. The breakthrough came when Sarah Kim mentioned their expansion into Asian markets. I'd noticed references to this in their quarterly reports and had prepared some preliminary research on regulatory challenges in key markets. You've already been thinking about our international expansion? Michael asked, looking at the framework I developed. It seemed like the logical next step for your growth trajectory, I said. I thought we could explore how Meridian might support that initiative. 2 hours later, Phoenix hadn't just agreed to stay with Meridian. They'd signed an expanded contract worth $120 million, a 60% increase from their original agreement. David found me in my office that evening, still processing what had happened. Evelyn, in 12 years of running this company, I've never seen anything like that. You didn't just save an account, you transformed it. Patricia stopped by the next morning with news that made my head spin. Marketing wants your input on client psychology for their next campaign. Sales is asking if they can implement your relationship-building frameworks company-wide. Operations wants to discuss how your process optimization strategies could work across all accounts. At Sterling, I'd begged for years just to have my ideas heard. At Meridian, my expertise was being sought out by departments I hadn't even worked with yet. The contrast was overwhelming. In less than a month at Meridian, I'd accomplished more and received more recognition than in 4 years at Sterling. That night, I called Sophia to share the news about Phoenix Industries. I'm so proud of you, she said, and I could hear the smile in her voice. You found a place that actually deserves your talent. For the first time in my career, I was working somewhere that didn't just tolerate my abilities, they celebrated them. While I was thriving at Meridian, Sterling Consulting was falling apart. The news reached me through industry gossip and occasional updates from former colleagues who'd kept my number. Derek's first major failure happened with no other client than Technova Industries, the $75 million client I'd helped Marcus secure. They called for their quarterly strategy review. Derek confidently walked into that meeting with my original presentation slides, thinking he could coast on the foundation I'd built. Margaret, who'd landed a position at Meridian's accounting firm, filled me in on what happened next. Rebecca Carter asked Derek 3 basic questions about their supply chain optimization strategy. Margaret told me over coffee. He couldn't answer any of them. When she asked for the contact who developed the framework, Derek said he'd created it himself. Rebecca had immediately called James to complain. She told him that the person who'd presented the original strategy clearly understood their business inside and out, but this new consultant seemed to have no idea what he was talking about. Derek had tried to schedule a follow-up meeting to refine their approach, but Technova canceled their contract before the week was out. That $75 million loss was just the beginning. Morrison Industries followed 2 weeks later. They'd specifically requested to work with me on their Q4 expansion planning, and when James told them I'd left the company, they asked to speak with whoever had trained me. Derek claimed he'd mentored you, Margaret continued, shaking her head. Morrison's CEO laughed and said if that were true, Derek would be able to answer his questions about their European logistics challenges. Derek couldn't. Phoenix Corp, Anderson Group, and 3 smaller clients all pulled their contracts within 6 months. Every single one cited the same concern. The consultant they trusted was gone, and her replacement didn't understand their business. James tried damage control, hiring expensive external consultants to fill the gaps, but it was too late. Word had spread through industry networks that Sterling was losing clients and talent. Potential new clients started going elsewhere. The company that had grown from 150 to 300 employees was going down fast within 8 months. James had to cancel plans for the new downtown location he'd been bragging about. He was looking for a new senior consultant. The most devastating blow came when I heard through the grapevine that James had approached Marcus, practically begging him to come back. He offered me senior partner, full equity stake, whatever I wanted, Marcus told me when we met for coffee. He said the company was struggling and needed proven leadership. What did you tell him? Marcus smiled grimly. I told him that proven leadership was sitting in a corner office at Meridian Global, and he'd chosen to promote his nephew instead. By the end of the year, Derek had been quietly demoted back to his original position, though James couldn't afford to fire him outright. The innovative strategies he'd stolen from me had proven worthless, without the relationships and expertise needed to implement them. The new senior consultant they finally hired had somewhat stabilized the ship, but things were far from how they were. Through all the career chaos and triumph, the most surprising development was what happened with Marcus. After we'd both left Sterling, we'd stayed in touch through occasional coffee meetings and industry event run-ins. What started as mutual support between two people who'd survived the same toxic workplace gradually became something deeper. Marcus had thrown himself into his real estate investments with the same intensity he'd brought to consulting. Within 6 months, he'd acquired 2 commercial properties in San Francisco and was developing a third. The financial security that had let him walk away from Sterling was now growing into genuine wealth. "I should have done this years ago," he told me during one of our coffee catch-ups. "I spent so long trying to prove myself in corporate environments when I could have been building something of my own." Watching him talk about his projects, I saw the same excitement I felt about my work at Meridian. We were both finally in places where our efforts directly correlated with our success. Our first official date happened almost by accident. We'd planned to meet for coffee after a particularly brutal week at Meridian where I'd been juggling 3 major client presentations. Marcus showed up with takeout from my favorite Thai restaurant instead. "Figured you might be too tired for a proper meal," he said, unpacking containers in my apartment. "But you still need to eat." Sitting on my couch with pad thai and wine, talking about our respective victories and challenges, I realized something had shifted between us. This wasn't just friendship anymore. "Can I ask you something?" Marcus said as we were cleaning up. "Do you think we would have gotten to know each other if we'd both stayed at Sterling?" I considered it. Probably not. I would have been too resentful, and you would have been too uncomfortable with the situation. So James's terrible decision-making actually did us a favor. In the most twisted way possible, yes. Our relationship developed naturally from there. We were both successful independently, both confident in our career choices, both done with compromising our values for other people's comfort. For the first time in my life, I was in a relationship with someone who saw me as an equal partner rather than a supporting character in their story. "I love that you challenge me," Marcus said one night as we walked along the waterfront. "You make me want to be better at everything I do." "Same here," I replied and meant it. This wasn't the desperate, prove-my-worth dynamic I'd had with previous boyfriends. This was 2 strong people choosing to build something together because it enhanced both their lives. 3 months into officially dating, Marcus asked me something that caught me off guard. "What would you think about starting our own consulting firm?" I stared at him. "Are you serious? Think about it. You've got the industry relationships and strategic expertise. I've got the business development background and the capital to get started. We could build something that actually values talent over politics." The idea was terrifying and exhilarating at the same time. But looking at Marcus, seeing the genuine partnership he was offering, I realized this was exactly the kind of opportunity I'd been working toward my entire career. "I appreciate the offer, and I'd love to do this with you down the line. But I love my job, and I don't feel quite ready to start our own consulting firm," I said, and his smile told me everything I needed to know about our future together. 8 months after leaving Sterling Consulting, I was in my Meridian office reviewing quarterly projections when my assistant knocked on the door with a confused expression. "This came for you," she said, holding an elegant cream-colored envelope. "It's from Sterling Consulting." I recognized the expensive cardstock immediately, the same invitations they sent every year for their annual awards dinner. My name was written in gold calligraphy across the front, and for a moment, I wondered if it was some kind of mistake. Inside was a formal invitation to Sterling's Excellence in Leadership Awards dinner, with a handwritten note at the bottom. "We would be honored by your presence as we celebrate exceptional contributions to our industry. James Whitmore." I stared at the invitation, trying to figure out what game James was playing. Was this some twisted attempt at reconciliation? A public relations move to show they harbored no hard feelings toward former employees? Sophia found me that evening, still turning the invitation over in my hands. "You're not seriously considering going," she said, reading over my shoulder. "Actually, I think I am." "Why would you put yourself through that?" I thought about it for a moment. 8 months ago, walking into that room would have felt like facing my failures. Now I was curious to see who I'd become. "Because I'm not the same person who left there in tears," I said finally. "I want to see the difference." The next morning, I called Sterling's events coordinator and RSVP'd yes. I had no idea what James was planning, but I was ready for whatever came next. The grand ballroom looked exactly the same as it had for the past 4 years, but walking in that night, everything felt different. I wore a midnight blue designer gown that had cost more than my monthly rent at Sterling, and I carried myself like the successful executive I'd become. The reactions were immediate and mixed. Some former colleagues approached with genuine warmth. Margaret hugged me and whispered, "You look amazing." Others, like Derek, kept their distance, offering only awkward nods from across the room. Tom from accounting cornered me near the bar. "Evelyn, we've all been following your success at Meridian. That Phoenix Industries deal was incredible." "Thank you. How are things here?" His smile faltered slightly. "Different. We're rebuilding." The cocktail hour felt like navigating a minefield of careful conversations and loaded glances. Everyone knew the story of my departure, and most seemed genuinely happy to see me thriving. But there was an undercurrent of tension, like everyone was waiting for something to happen. When James took the stage, I understood why. "Tonight, we're introducing a new award," he announced, his voice carrying that familiar, authoritative tone. "The Distinguished Alumni Recognition, honoring former Sterling employees who've gone on to achieve exceptional success in our industry." My stomach dropped. This was why I'd been invited. Our first recipient built lasting client relationships, developed innovative strategies, and helped grow Sterling from 150 to 300 employees during her tenure here. Please join me in recognizing Evelyn Hayes of Meridian Global. The applause was thunderous, but I felt like I was moving through water as I walked to the podium. James handed me a crystal award that caught the ballroom lights, his smile strained but determined. Taking the microphone, I looked out at faces I'd worked alongside for 4 years. Some were smiling genuinely, others looked uncomfortable, and James stood beside me with an expression I couldn't quite read. "Thank you for this recognition," I began, my voice steady despite my racing heart. "My time at Sterling taught me invaluable lessons about business, about resilience, and most importantly, about knowing your own worth." I paused, letting that sink in. I learned that talent without recognition is just potential, that hard work without respect is just endurance, and that loyalty without reciprocity is just settling for less than you deserve. The room was completely silent now. Success isn't about building perfect systems or maintaining the status quo. It's about recognizing talent wherever it exists, nurturing it regardless of who possesses it, and creating environments where excellence can flourish. I could see James's smile becoming more strained with each word. I paused for what seemed like a lifetime before I continued. "I learned and achieved a lot here, James. Thank you for giving me the opportunity to grow. And for that, I'll always be grateful." The applause started slowly, led by Margaret and Tom, then spread throughout the room. Not everyone joined in, but enough to make the message clear. As I handed the microphone back to James, his expression had shifted from forced cheer to something approaching alarm. My speech had been professionally delivered and graciously worded, but everyone in that room understood the real message. After the ceremony, as I was preparing to leave, James appeared beside me with that familiar urgent energy. "Evelyn, could we talk privately? Just for a moment." He led me to a quiet alcove off the main ballroom, away from the lingering crowd. Up close, he looked older than I remembered, the stress of the past 8 months etched in new lines around his eyes. "That was quite a speech," he said, attempting his old confident smile. "It was honest." James ran his hand through his silver hair, a gesture I recognized from countless difficult meetings. "Look, I'll cut straight to it. We made mistakes. I made mistakes. But Sterling needs someone with your expertise." Here it comes, I thought. I'm prepared to offer you senior partner, full equity stake, your own division to run however you see fit. Name your salary. Whatever Meridian's paying you, we'll beat it by 30%. The offer that would have changed my life 8 months ago now felt hollow, almost insulting. James, I appreciate the recognition, but whatever went wrong before, we can fix it, he interrupted, desperation creeping into his voice. The company needs fresh leadership, and frankly, we can't afford to keep losing talent like we lost you and Marcus. I studied this man who'd once held so much power over my happiness, who dismissed my worth with casual cruelty, who is now practically begging me to save his company. I'm not angry anymore, James, I said finally. Actually, I'm grateful. His face showed confusion. You taught me that my value doesn't depend on other people's recognition of it. That I don't need anyone's validation to succeed. That sometimes the best thing that can happen to you is being forced to bet on yourself. James opened his mouth to argue, but I continued. Meridian appreciates what I bring to the table. They've given me resources, respect, and opportunities that match my capabilities. Why would I leave that to return to a place that had to lose a quarter of its client base before realizing my worth? The silence stretched between us, and I could see him processing the reality of his situation. He'd gambled everything on the belief that I was replaceable, and now he was discovering the true cost of that arrogance. Evelyn, please. At least consider it. I already have. The answer is no. And it's because I love where I am right now. 6 months later, I was standing on the deck of a luxury yacht during Meridian's annual company retreat, watching the sunset paint the ocean in shades of gold and crimson. The retreat was a celebration of our record-breaking year, revenue up 40%, client retention at 98%, and 3 major industry awards for innovation. Marcus found me by the railing, 2 champagne flutes in his hands, and a smile that made my heart skip. Penny for your thoughts? Just thinking about how different everything is now, I said, accepting the champagne. A year ago, I thought my career was over. And now you're the youngest senior director in Meridian history. Marcus and I had decided to postpone starting our own firm. With both of us thriving in our respective careers, we wanted to build our individual success stories before creating something together. Speaking of new beginnings, Marcus said, and something in his tone made me turn to look at him fully. He was down on one knee, holding a ring that caught the sunset like captured fire. Evelyn Hayes, you're the smartest, most determined, most incredible woman I've ever known. Will you marry me? The yes was out of my mouth before I'd even processed the question. As he slipped the ring onto my finger, I realized this was what success actually looked like. Not just professional achievement, but finding someone who saw your worth and chose to build a life with you as an equal partner. Later that evening, as we announced our engagement to cheering colleagues, I thought about James and Sterling Consulting. According to industry reports, they were still struggling, still trying to rebuild what they'd lost when they chose politics over talent. But that was no longer my story. My story was about refusing to settle, about betting on myself when no one else would, and about finding both professional fulfillment and personal happiness on my own terms. Sometimes the best revenge isn't revenge at all. It's building a life so incredible that your past rejections become the foundation of your future success.